So I'd like to just talk in this context of equanimity. I'd like to talk about the divine messengers, as they're called, sickness, old age, and death. This may have some relevance to you. We are all subject to these three things, and they play a huge role, potentially, in our spiritual development. You know, in the Buddhist tradition, the story is that the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, was a prince, and the father spoiled him and kept him in the palace so he wouldn't see anything difficult in life. He'd received a prophecy at his son's birth that said he would either be a great world ruler or become an ascetic and a great spiritual teacher. And his father had a definite preference for which he became, and always a mistake as a parent, and tried to give him all the riches and pleasures that he could to make him attached to the royal life. It wasn't actually royalty. They weren't kings. There was actually more of an aristocratic family, but as time went on, the story turned him into a king. And but the Buddha, being what, an adolescent young man, snuck out anyway. And sure enough, as the story goes, he asked his charioteer. He didn't just sneak out the way most of us would sneak out. He had his charioteer, of course, hook up the chariot. So it was not a real subtle kind of going out the countryside. But they went out into the town, and he saw someone who was very feeble and sick and wanted to know about that. And so the charioteer told him, yes, that's sickness. That's someone who's ill. We're all subject to that. And it was a shock to the young Siddhartha. And so they went back to the palace. On the second trip, he saw someone very old who was bent over and gray, and asked about that. And then bothered by that. And then they went out the third time, and they actually saw somebody who was, covered in a shroud and was dead. So it said that contact with these three things deeply troubled his heart, and it spoiled his pleasure in the palace. It spoiled the sense that he could just while away his life with good things, and then have it all end in sickness, old age, and death. Death had been kept away from him. I don't know how. It's a story, so you don't have to really know how. Sickness, old age, and death had been kept away from him. So regardless of the historical accuracy of the story, it underlines the power of these three things to create in us an urgency to do the practice and to come to a place of peace with life as it is. It's interesting because this, we're talking about equanimity, and sometimes equanimity is conceived of as peace. We've talked about it as balance of a number of factors. Here's an example of the value of being disturbed, the value of being unsettled by something, and how that began to move you toward awakening, toward coming out of your kind of trance or your stupor about what this life is. So, in some sense, it balances the teaching of equanimity. It's not about all being chill about everything. There are moments to be deeply disturbed about things. and to feel a sense of urgency. So fortunately or unfortunately, I could spin the story both ways. I became ill at a relatively young age, in my late 30s. Actually, it was my mid 30s. I was about 35 when my son was born. And I became ill in a way that nobody really could identify the cause of. I was extremely tired. Like I just wanted to sit or possibly lie down all the time. And I had a baby and then a toddler, so I couldn't just sit on the couch, but I wanted to. And my sleep was very poor. I'd wake up a lot at night. Sometimes I'd wake up sweating. My body temperature dropped to, was it 97? I started kind of getting these orange, probably yeast rashes under my armpits, and looked very pale. And didn't know what to do about it. All my labs came back normal. And my doctor theorized that I had a chronic sinus infection and gave me antibiotics. And I felt a little better and then no better. So she gave me a whole lot more antibiotics and I felt no better. Possibly made me worse, possibly injured my gut at that point. And I started, feeling bad whenever I ate, like I was having allergic reactions to the food I ate. Anyway, this went on only for 15 years. Eventually, I got a diagnosis of chronic fatigue immune deficiency syndrome, which now has a better name. I have to say, I really didn't like that name. People thought I was tired in a way that they get tired, and in America, it's not okay to complain about being tired, or you need to complain about being tired in a kind of a heroic way because we're always driving ourselves too hard. So like being tired is a badge of honor. And so I didn't feel like the name did it justice. There were a lot of kind of neurological symptoms to it, a lot of brain fog. Sort of like if you remember the old analog TVs, if your antenna wasn't right, you'd get all this fog kind of coming through the picture. Felt very much like that with my brain. So, there wasn't a lot of help offered. And it was kind of devastating, I have to say, and especially with a young family. And I was very grateful that already I knew this practice. I had already spent, before all this came on, I had already spent 11 years in the practice quite seriously. And so I kind of took it on in that spirit of living moment to moment and day to day, and noticing how things are, not going into my head with worry if possible. I didn't have a lot of energy to worry anyway, but it was definitely a possibility. And it created just an enormous sense of loss. But it also really encouraged me to practice. And in some ways, I wouldn't be here teaching if it didn't go this way. Eventually, we moved to Massachusetts from Seattle. I closed my psychotherapy practice, and we all moved here to be closer to Kate's parents and get some help with childcare. And I went back to practice more intensively at Insight Meditation Society, which sounds very like what should I say? If you actually saw how I was doing this practice, I was mostly sitting in a stupor, I have to say. But I had some powerful breakthroughs in terms of the practice, powerful insights into the nature of reality, despite the poor condition of my health. And I did appreciate not working for a couple of years to really devote myself to the practice. And something shifted quite deeply in doing that. So I got my first divine messenger early in life. And it was a challenge, like how to use mindfulness, how to be mindful in a way that kept me relatively at peace, not in fear, not in self-pity, to do what I could to make myself feel better. And gradually I started to find some things that made me feel better. And I'm happy to say that at a certain point, I came out of it. And I don't experience that today. I may be a little lower energy than your average guy, but now that's mixing with becoming older. So, people don't expect you to be that peppy. So that helps a little bit. I think that expectations have gone down. So when sickness comes, and I have to say, even now, after having been chronically ill for all those years, I still am really impatient when I get acutely ill. It feels like a rude interruption to my life, and I don't like the feeling of it. I don't think anybody does. It's kind of the nature of illness that you feel badly. But I feel like one of the shifts that happened early on was a reorientation to midlife, that life isn't about me getting what I want and having it all work out. Which is, I think, the operating assumption of many people. It's not when you actually say it. Maybe you realize, well, I don't know about that. But it is actually how people tend to live, is that life is about getting what you want and having it all work out. And so it's sometimes a blessing to have something like this that is not at all what you want, and that you don't have control over to stop, And, bless people, they would always tell me things that I should be doing to make it all better, and things that they do to keep themselves healthy, as if it were somehow my fault or something I was doing wrong. This was all going on. And it may have been. I could probably tell you my understanding of some of the things that were going wrong. I have a lot better understanding of matters of health than I did when all of this started. But nonetheless, when you're right in the middle of it, that's not the experience. The experience is something is really happening that you don't like, isn't what you want. It's unpleasant. It's uncomfortable. It feels bad. And it feels bad in a social context too. It's not just your personal thing, but it's other people who depend on you. And it's kind of fading out of friendships that you don't have energy for or time for. It's being misunderstood, so forth. So perhaps some of you know this experience from the inside of chronic illness. Perhaps you don't. But it could be your number will come up at some point. And so this talk may be helpful if it orients you to, how to deal with a divine messenger like this. I have one of my phrases, which I think I probably shared in some form with you. I'm here to know this human experience and to learn. I find it very useful to use this in the face of unwanted situations, unwanted experience, to remind myself what I'm here for. I'm here to know this human experience. And to know this human experience means to know all of it. I now know something about what it is to be chronically ill. I know what it is to have your body kind of ailing as everybody else around you of your own age is doing fine, seems to be doing fine anyway. And it's actually helpful to know that experience from the inside. And I hope that it helps me when the next kind of sickness comes at some point in the future. Um, now I feel like I'm not dealing with illness. I'm dealing with, aches and pains, just kind of the signs of how I've been in the body, how I've moved, how I've sat too long at a desk, and so forth, that's starting to wear on me. And hopefully death is a long way away, but we never know. We actually never know. So the time to practice is now. You never know when life is going to deal you a profound loss, and a profound loss in your health, profound loss in your capacities to walk, to even think clearly. I was very identified with my intelligence as a young man. I still am. I have to say, if I'm honest, I'm still identified with that. And so it was particularly difficult to have my mind go foggy and to not be able to concentrate very well. And it isn't as if I lost all my mental acuity, but boy, things were hard that hadn't been hard before. And one of the things that I gained, I think, in all of this was a greater gratitude. It's often the case that healthy people take their health for granted. It's often the case that healthy people believe that their health is due to their virtue. Believe me, I know. I have had enough people kind of talk to me from that point of view that I've started to recognize, oh, okay, they believe that they're healthy because they're doing all the right things. So please do all the right things. I'm not at all saying abuse your health or don't do the right things. But nonetheless, that is no guarantee of anything. And even if you're not involved in a disease process, there's always accidents that happen. There's always things that could happen. And in this tradition, the spiritual path, you're encouraged to contemplate this. It's not considered morose. It's not considered, being pessimistic or being negative. It's actually seen as life-giving to contemplate sickness, old age, and death. To know these three things are coming if they're not already here. It's very much a part of the practice in Asia to do charnel ground meditations, to go to where bodies are burned, and watch that process happen. To know what a body is and to know its impermanence in a deep way. And these experiences are meant to be disturbing. There's something that has to actually be disturbed in us sometimes to break the trance we are in, that we'll be here forever, and that we can take for granted our abilities and our health. So equanimity. The key is this shift. I really think this shift is powerful, of coming to realize what you're here for. I mean, my words are my words. You can use them if you find them helpful. You might have to come up with your own formulation of what you're here for. It will work best if it's truly yours, if it truly hits you as true. But mine that helped me through this period and continues to help me is I'm here to know this human experience and to learn. And to be very clear that this human experience has pain and pleasure. loss and gain, fame and obscurity, praise and disrepute. It has all those four winds blowing through it. And there's nothing wrong there. It's not wrong that life has these things. You're not necessarily doing something wrong as you encounter the difficult aspects of life. Perhaps you did something wrong. You probably did it in ignorance. You probably would have done something differently if you had not been ignorant. And ignorance is, it's a funny thing. There's a little bit of a way that we choose it, but not entirely. So let yourself off the hook. All of these things, they're here. They're here. Every single one of them has the potential to help you to be compassionate. Every suffering that you endure may help you to understand other people's suffering. Every weakness that you begin to see in yourself will help you feel goodwill towards others in their weakness and their ignorance. Every difficulty that you face potentially with practice can make you grateful for what you have, can make you turn towards what you have with gratitude. And all of it can feed your poise, your balance, your peace with whatever arises. And so, again, there's some discernment here. Let things disturb you that might actually lead to your growth and your awakening. Let sickness and old age go deep inside you. Many of you are at the age perhaps when your parents are dying or have died. You've watched the process perhaps up close. You've probably seen the way that the body fails. And so it's clear to me at 68, I'm still in pretty good health, that what the trajectory is. I can feel the trajectory in my body. And what it says is appreciate the time you have. Make the most of the time you have. Be gentle with yourself. And realize that everybody is vulnerable. We're all vulnerable. And that's what's kind of baked into life in a good way. All right.